Welcome to your Rally Point podcast. Organizations need a reason to exist, and people need a reason to care, but none of it matters if you can't connect the two. This podcast is where nonprofits, advocacy groups, and mission-driven organizations discover their rallying point. It is your go-to resource for mobilizing support, building authentic connections, and driving real results. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's rally together to create the impact you're meant to make. This is your Rally Point podcast, brought to you by rallycorp.com.
Hey there, welcome back to your Rally Point podcast. Back with Jack today. And Jack, it is always good to see you.
Yeah, thanks.
How you doing?
Great. It's a week later. It feels like the week just melted away quickly, and here we are again.
What happened to it?
I don't know. I mean, literally, and actually, we didn't record these back to back. I'm serious about, like, it's been a week. It felt like it was yesterday.
Sometimes we record them back to back. A lot of times we don't, and sometimes it goes 2 weeks. But this was only a week, and I was looking over my calendar trying to figure out what happened to the days.
Yeah, I know. It's graduation time for some people's kids in college and high school, like you, and it's the end of May already.
Yeah,
crazy.
Well, here we are. So, Jack, today we got some feedback on an episode a few episodes back, which, by the way, I am so grateful because feedback allows us to improve, gives us clarity on what kinds of questions folks are asking. It makes us better at what we do, and therefore, I think creates more value for our listeners. So the feedback I got was on the episode concerning sales. We went a lot into your personal experience with sales and what sales means to us as a company. But a few folks are like, hey, how do we apply that to nonprofits? Like, I'm in nonprofits. Do we do sales? Like, what does that look like? And like, what, because I think it sparked interest in them that there's this idea in nonprofits that they don't really do sales. They do more, development. But even that was more of a question than a statement, right? The way this person posed it. Right. So I want to go into a little bit of our conversation around sales because you've got decades in sales, right?
Yes.
You have forgotten more about, salesmanship and what it takes to help connect people with solutions to their problems. Than what probably what I've learned. So I love your thought process on that. But today we're going to shape the conversation a little bit more towards that of nonprofits, so that nonprofits can leave this conversation feeling like, wow, that's what we mean and that's how we do. How does that sound?
That sounds great. Yeah.
All right. So take it from the top. So let's just do a quick recap on what sales is. I kind of gave a little bit foreshadowing, but in your mind, what is sales and why do you do it?
I have something, a product, a service, or a cause that I want my customer or donor in this regard,
someone else, another person,
I want to help them solve a problem, a need, or introduce them to something that I feel like might benefit them. And how I do that, there's all kinds of sales methodologies that you'll hear in the sales world, MEDIC now and Challenger types, and we use some NEPQ styles and all these other things, right? But at the end of the day, you really need to try to speak the language from a salesperson's perspective. Speak the language that your client speaks, your donor speaks, your supporters speak, your volunteers speak. And when you don't do that, there's a disconnect. And we do the same thing in sales. I mean, and we use all these different techniques to do that. And so, but if we turn this sales like experience and all these methodologies about 180 degrees, it puts us squarely into what nonprofits have to do, which they're don't mean to be like brutal about it, but they need to raise money to keep their operations going and things like that, but also to give back to the people they're helping. And convincing someone or engaging with someone to provide you with a donation or a gift of a car or whatever it might be. I mean, that's probably one of the hardest things, because if I'm selling software and you're like, someone has a need to fill a technology gap, that's pretty easy. But separating an individual or going to an individual and asking for money is probably asking for a donation or support is probably one of the hardest things.
It is.
And that's the nonprofit world.
Yeah. And one of the things that so we use the word sales, but you can plug in the word development, and some businesses,
Yeah.
including ours, use the word business development, right?
Mm-hmm.
Partly because we sales has a little bit of a baggage around it. The word sales, somebody think of sales like a used car salesman, right?
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes we'll use the word development. We're developing business, but I've
Right.
moved back into using more of the word sales because I
Yeah.
think what we want to communicate is that because we just want to be honest, like our job is to sell software. Like that's why
Mm-hmm.
we're not a nonprofit. We might act like one as a startup
Right.
sometimes, like no profits. But the bottom line is our job is to create shareholder value
Mm-hmm.
and to do that at a massive scale by solving problems for real people, right? Real problems
Yes.
for real people. So use the word sales, use the word development, pick your word. But here's the thing, Jack. Some people come into those conversations thinking that what they're doing or what the motive is to separate somebody from something. I'm going to separate you from your money. I'm going to take
Mm-hmm.
money out of your pocket and put it in my pocket. And that's actually incorrect. That is. If that's your perspective, or even if that's subconscious, it doesn't even have to be in your awareness. But if you don't lean into that mindset and kind of surface that and address that, then that carries into conversations, even in the mannerisms, the way the tonality. We'll talk about tonality in a minute. Your tone, your posture, your position, your ask, your words, your language, everything will feel as if it's labor intensive because you're separating something from someone. And the fact of the matter is good salesmanship, if it's a craft of helping people solve problems, is actually not separating them from their money, but it's creating more value for them. It's actually putting more money in their pockets, or it's creating time in their day, which allows them to get home on time with their kids, which creates value in their life. So the question is how do we, in business development, either for profit, but particularly in donor development, how do we see what we're doing is not separating someone from their money, i.e. donation, but creating a path or opportunity to create value for them that they would not otherwise have had it not be for us and our cause.
Mm-hmm.
You have some ideas on that, Jack?
Yeah. I mean, I'll start with a quick example. A family member was giving to a very large nonprofit. I won't mention them.
Yeah, sure.
And had been giving to them, quarterly for a year or so. And the tone, I'll talk about tone for a second, with this nonprofit changed. And instead of getting this kind of warm, this person's 85 years old, right? He's my dad, right? So, so he gets these great mailers, pens in them, cool little, it's crazy what the nonprofits will send. But this particular nonprofit became aggressive. Once my dad had given for a certain period of time, something triggered them to become more aggressive. And it felt almost like my dad had achieved a certain level of donation and stepped up into from a bronze donor to a silver donor, and the attack was on. And you could tell by the tone. And then they started calling. And it was, this is over the top, right? This is, probably the exception, but it's a well-known nonprofit. And so it all aligns with, initially there was a great feeling that my dad had, and I talked to him about this, about helping, this nonprofit and the people they were helping. Sure. But then it became so distasteful, and and I'm sure the nonprofit, someone there made a strategic decision to do this. So it all aligns in you could feel the change in tone. And I think that at the end of the day, every initial interaction that we have as humans is based on that impression. Whether you meet somebody in the supermarket or whether you're trying to do some fundraising and development of donors and things like that, we're all human. We talk about this all the time. But great salespeople usually start from a human perspective. Great fundraising programs start from a human perspective. Exactly. They don't put you into an algorithm of contact and sequences and all this other stuff. That's part of automating it and making your processes efficient, but that should be invisible to the supporter or donor.
It's almost as if you want to create automation but not make it feel automated.
Correct. Yeah. It's crazy. And, you mentioned, we'll talk about tonality here in a minute, but yeah, I think that some of my most successful sales, wins, I guess, because we're salespeople, we talk about that over the years, have been when I really felt like there was, empathy and and a little bit of fun around it, and positive energy around it. And I think in the nonprofit space, especially people who are like, we see it, we talk to these people, donor development, donor relations and things, they kind of get burned out.
Mhm.
And there's a tendency for them, maybe in this industry to get a little, frustrated for years of selling the
Yeah.
nonprofit to donors, right?
Yeah.
And we feel that too in sales, but yeah.
And I think, you mentioned your dad. I think that's a great point. Like something triggers some system, some process, some whatever, so that it becomes a bit more aggressive. But
Yeah.
the key, though, and that's perfectly fine. Segmentation is a thing,
Yeah.
and at certain levels, one should bubble up potentially larger, potential donations, particularly at somebody at 85. Like if you have any sense of their birth, year, you might
Right.
want to move that person into a legacy program, right? Like
Sure.
why ask for $25 or even $250?
Right.
When you can move into more of a, hey, let's make a sizable contribution. But here's the key: it's not about them; it's about your dad.
Yes.
A legacy program is about my legacy, my fear, my root underlying fear that I am irrelevant and that I will go away and I will be forgotten. It's my
Yes.
need to be seen both now and in the future, and my desire to be connected with as a human. So if you come along as a human and you offer me a path to that where I don't perceive that elsewhere, or I
Right.
don't, like that's a real felt need, that's something that I can get behind and be like, oh, I see. And the trust that says, hey, if you do this legacy program, this is what we can do with it. And this is how you'll know we'll be accountable.
Hmm.
It's that
Hmm.
accountability, that trust, and
Yeah.
about them, not you, right?
Yeah.
But when we and so often, and I have to kind of chuckle, but sometimes we get on the phone with these people with big titles: director of communications, vice
Yeah.
president of development. They're 22 years old and don't have really any real
Yeah.
experience. And
Yeah.
here's what I want to tell them. I want to say, look, you've got this, and it's not about your age. It's about your ability to connect as an empathetic person. At 22 years old, you could be a more effective vice president of development than a dude in his 40s or 50s or beyond, because of your connection to the people that you're connecting with and the ability to move them to a place of trust and safety and being seen, right?
Right.
So
Right.
but it comes down to just recognizing that sales is an art more than it is a
It is.
science. Is that true?
It is. And whenever we try to apply science to this equation, whether it's the
Mhm.
sales or the fundraising aspect,
Sure.
I think that those tools are good. I mean, I pull them up once in a while, like, well, I need to do a reset here. Look at my the details of how I do my business
Sure.
technically. But whenever I do that, I kind of lose I turn to like lower quality, and higher volume, I guess,
Yeah.
like I sacrifice kind of the onesie to, the personal connections, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to reach out to 10 people today,
Sure.
or 20 or 50, and I'm like, that'll get me more activity in my fundraising. That'll get me more fundraising activity, and I'll get
Sure.
more outreach and more opens or whatever it might be. But that's often not the case. And when I settle down and I do like a one-to-one personalized, and I know that sounds so old school, but then I start to see the opens. And
Yeah.
when you
Sure.
do that personal outreach type stuff, feels way better too.
Hmm.
And especially in fundraising. I mean, fundraising and nonprofits it's all personal. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, we started doing handwritten notes recently for that reason, because because it's so, without that personal touch, we can have a good Zoom call. You can see me as a person. I'm doing an on-site today with a big food bank here in San Diego. But here, if I can get to your facility and meet you in person, see the whites of your eyes, in the sales they say press and flesh, like shaking some hands,
Yeah.
like to be in the room, because then I move from a theoretical software company that's like ethereal, like it's already a concept that you have to get your head around. Like, what is mobile? What is text
Mhm.
messaging? What is this thing called software, cloud software? Like, what does all this mean? And what separates you from another vendor? Here's the thing: proximity to a person. I will be in your office and I will listen, ask good questions, and connect, and then later send you a thank you card. Not because I'm trying to separate you from your money, but because I'm trying to create real value and let you know that I see you and I'm here to solve this challenge, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I tell my customers all the time, they only have one neck to choke. If anything goes wrong, it's mine. Just if you want someone to blame, You got to, go before the board or before an executive team and explain a miss. I'm your guy. I'll be that guy for you, because here's the thing I know about my position. I'm disposable. You'll get someone
Right.
else. You
Right.
go get another
We all
software
know
tool if you need
that.
to. Yeah. But the key is like, I can also be the guy that's accountable to solve the problem and to shift the trust. Like, hey, listen, I've got this and I've got you. When it comes to mobile messaging, is what we do.
Yeah.
So you can learn all that. You can spend $1 million building a platform like we did, and you can spend the next 7 years figuring it out like we just did, or you can just buy into what we can do for you
Right.
and trust that we have this handled. But nobody wants to buy features; they want to buy results, and they want to buy it from a human.
Yeah. Yeah.
As a human.
And if you, again, I talked about turning that 180 degrees. It feels good. My dad feels good when he donates to the right people.
For the right reason.
And there is a little Indian school, and I think it's in Wyoming. They send my dad blankets and stuff. It's amazing. The coolest thing. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, they're cheap little blankets and things, but my dad loves, and he gives them like $25 a month. And they send him these packages of things. And they actually, the other day, they sent him they did some cartoons, and these were real with crayons and stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, they may have had these kids do, 100 of these things, but it was real. I checked it. It was real crayon. Yeah. And so, and that, my dad and I were talking about, like, my dad's like, I will donate to these people constantly because I'm seeing the results. I'm feeling like this is filling a gap that I have, that I want to help kids and help people. Yeah. And so back to what you said, instead of like separating my dad from his money, my dad is feeling wonderful about what he's doing for this little school.
Humanity. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the thing about, I wish, as nonprofit development folks, I wish they understood how powerful they actually are. They're selling an opportunity. Let's just use the word create. They're creating an opportunity, developing an opportunity that is a path to something that individual desperately wants. That is to feel alive and be seen. It's humanity. It's philanthropy. Yeah. It's why we are what we are. And those of us that, have had resources that have been blessed in that way have recognized that we only got resources when we started letting go of resources. Like, the money is not the objective. I could care less about money. If tomorrow they announced that we could use Pokemon to somehow navigate the universe, I'd be about that. Like, I don't care.
Right.
Like, it's a bunch of dead presidents, right? The value of the money on the bills or on the coins or in the whatever is what somebody else is willing to place on that. Like, what can I get in that? And what I can get out of working with a food bank, for example. I mean, Jack and you and I, we did this. We toured a big food bank in Dallas. The amount of freezer space, you remember the forklifts driving around in that freezer, how massive that was? Yeah. Do you know how much it would cost me as an individual to go build a freezer like that and to put together that infrastructure? Like, that's impossible.
Millions.
I couldn't do it. But I can donate a little bit of my time and money to facilitate and be part of that and be a small piece of that huge operations. And I don't have to justify to my wife while we're building a freezer in the backyard. Right? Like, that would be absurd. So it's an opportunity to be part of something bigger than ourselves. Yes. That's the gift. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit. So we've been talking about like a little bit of the bigger picture of all this.
Sure. Let's drill into the what in the house.
Yeah. And back in October, we had a team meeting. The company did, and we all met in Texas. It was a great trip.
Offsite. Yep.
Yeah. And one of the things that we ran through is I ran through tonality. And this sounds very basic, but you know what? Sometimes it's great to get back to the basics. We all use tones in our everyday communication, but we may not realize it. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things and tools that we use in sales that could be directly related to nonprofit donor development. So I'm going to go through a couple of these things. You good here? Are we ready?
Do it. Let's do it. Yeah.
So the curious tone. There's 5 tones. We'll touch on 3 most important ones. A curious tone conveys genuine interest in understanding your donor's position. By expressing a sincere desire to learn about your donor's needs and challenges, this tone encourages them to share details more openly. It's collaborative and exploratory. The curious tone, everybody out there, is the way that I do sales. And it's the most used thing I do. And it's because it's natural, right? Here's an example. Walk me through what you do now when you donate to others, or how you like to donate to programs so I can understand more fully? Like, walk me through this.
Yeah.
Well, and
What have
that's
you done
kind
in
of
the
a
past?
curious,
Yeah.
right? I'm curious, ... And,
Yeah.
and that one phrase, I'm wondering and I'm curious, those two phrases should be tattooed on my forehead
Yeah.
as a salesperson. And
Yeah.
by the way, it works wonderfully in your relationships too.
Yeah. I was just gonna say.
Yeah. So I'm curious and I'm wondering, and then ask in a curious tone your question. You'll be
Yeah.
amazed. Second one. Now I use this one once in a while, and this can often be mixed with the curious tone. So it can be mixed up with that one. It's called the confused tone. The confused tone is a strategic tool used to prompt the donor or supporter to clarify or expand on a point. Tell me a little more about that. How do you mean? Or like, what do you mean by that? You and I were talking earlier. Why? Help me understand a little more why you would say that. Sometimes people even say, like, I give an explanation here. Well, the tone encourages the donor to articulate their thoughts more clearly, helping uncover underlying like pain they might have with donating or supporting an organization, right? And the sales ones I put here are stress. How do you mean stress? Or can you help me understand a little bit more about and ... right? And when you say, can you help me understand a little bit more? That's different than the curious tone. Can you help me understand a little bit more about ... That means that you're a little bit astray and you're asking them to help clarify. And by
you're kind of taking them down a path, it sounds like.
Right. By human nature. And you can say all of these things, by the way, in your interaction, in your emails, or if you have like what I would say top donors or gold donors, we talk about that a little bit, just your top tier donors, your major account donors. These are the things that you can say in your communication with them. But that confused tone sometimes helps really dig deeper. And then the last one that's really germane here is the concern tone. The concern tone demonstrates empathy and care for your donor's struggles. It positions you as an ally who genuinely wants to help them find like what we call a solution, make them feel understood and supported. And this is really, really important. So and it looks like this. Let's see, I got to get my, John, what's really holding you back from providing support for our organization? Now that's a risky question, but shows concern. Or a better way, what's your biggest concern about moving forward with us, or about donating to what we're doing, or supporting us?
And one that I've heard you use before that I really like is what would need to be true
for
X, Y, or Z.
You actually said that first when I first came to Rally.
My wife accuses me of manipulating her when I use that one on her. What would need to be true for us to have a great weekend together, right? So, but what I'm seeking out there is like there's something, I don't want to say barrier, but there's something that if things were a certain way, the assumption would be you would donate. So what would that look like? And I'm curious. Yeah, that's a great question. I like your questions. That's amazing.
Yeah, and so there was a cheat sheet of tonalities, and I obviously we can put it up here. But on the curious area, here's a few, and then I'll go through concerned and confused areas. So real quick, I'm curious. How do you? That's one. Can you walk me through how you ... today? I'm wondering, or what's the story behind that? That's a curious tone. Concerned, a little bit different. I can imagine this is a big impact for you. This is meaningful for you, right? That's a concerned tone. Are you? Well, this is a sales one. What's your biggest concern about solving the, problem, right? So we talk about that. And wow, that sounds really difficult. I can imagine that's impacting your ability to donate. And that's where if someone said a no, so you can turn that around by saying that, something like that. And then the last one, confused, is can you help me understand ... Just so I'm clear, how do you like to donate today? Or like, how do you like to contribute to programs today? can you explain why you say that? I'm kind of not getting it. And I'm not sure I follow. Can you explain that? And then your point is, what would need to be true for XXX, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So I think,
so those are kind of little cheat phrases that people can use, but you can say this in email. You can use these tones, and they can be like in email or other forms of communication. Just understand that there's curious tones, concerned tones, and confused tones.
and in after our offsite, Jack, I actually printed, because I think you gave it to us in a cheat sheet, like
I did,
one
yeah.
pager, and I printed that and put it on my desk because I kept referring back to it. And role playing with, by the way, AI, especially with the voice feature turned on, it's great to role play. You just ask it questions, and you be this, I'll be that, and saved many of marital fights just running it through, like, what is she trying to say in this text message, and how do I respond without being a turd? Like, slow it down. And here's the thing: it takes self-awareness to slow things down and ask questions. The power of curiosity is to drop judgment and decision, and to just simply stay open to learning. And it's coming from a legitimate place. I want to understand, why this, why now. So in your dad's situation, I want to tie back to what you said earlier. Do you think somebody from the nonprofit would have called your dad? How would they have applied these tones, and maybe in a conversation, ideally over the phone or in person, or, connecting somehow? But obviously email, sometimes you lose translation of tones, but you can in fact pull it off an email, particularly if that email has a video. By the way, we do little 1-2 minute videos in our emails that are very easy to play and interact with, even at 85. But assuming a phone call, because he triggered some alarm bell that he's now moved into another level of donor, so the segmentation kicked in. Would somebody have called him and asked him these questions, and kind of how would that conversation have flowed in your mind?
Yeah, so he's been getting those phone calls, and he's picked up a few, and now it's kind of, he gets a lot of these phone calls because of kind of what happens.
Giving his money away. Yeah, I love it.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just kind of the way things are. But I think that you would address that on the nose and start with a very empathetic tone. Mike, I see that you've been a really great donor for us for a long time, and somehow that stopped. Can you help me understand what happened between last year and where you're at now, and can you tell me what happened with us? And my dad would probably, my dad's a calm guy, and he would appreciate that, getting it right out there.
It's a concern. And it's not about like what happened because we need the money. It's like, hey, we just noticed this. And first off, we're very grateful, but we just want to make sure you're okay.
Yeah,
I'm curious.
Exactly.
Has something changed?
Right. And they would say, okay, Mike, we're going to send you out, I'm going to send you out a personal letter. You look for my signature on it. We want you back. And we're going to change the way we do this with you.
And what would need to be true for you to come back?
And what would need to be true? And they can send them, they can send them they have a cool brand, I mean, my dad puts all these magnets on his fridge that I'll send them magnets, right? So, but that would get my dad back. And what would that cost this nonprofit?
Yeah. Time, just a little bit of time.
Yeah. And my dad, he sits on his couch and he listens to the messages that are left. And sometimes he picks up the phone when he hears it. So if it's like, hey, this is Jane from that nonprofit, and we lost your mic, and we want to get you back, and we want to make it right with you. And my dad would write a check for $250.
Yeah, right.
Had he talked to her, and they send her a letter, hey, Mike, thanks for talking to me the other day. That would cost them in labor and time, $6?
Yeah. And some people might feel like, well, that's too aggressive. I wouldn't want to do that. That's too risky. And yes, you know what? You're going to get no's. You can't come off the bench in sports and not get attacked.
Right.
So if you're going to come onto the field, you're going to get tackled. Like if you want to be safe, don't even take a space on the bench. Just be in the auditorium or in the stadium and root, be the Monday morning quarterback that didn't actually play the game. Right.
Right.
I love it when these guys.
You're in the fundraising game, and you've been contacting
you're in this game. You're taking a seat from someone else who'll do it. So either get out of their way or do the job. And I mean that with love. That's tough love. But step up and realize, because here's the thing about leadership in sales, and this was very empowering for me when I started my career. A coach told me, like, my ability to grow as a leader and a salesperson in the role of development, whatever you want to call it, is entirely up to me. that is a example. I mean, I can only be such a good artist and only take, playing guitar so far, or even professional athleticism so far with my, because there is some natural ability there. When it comes to sales, it's actually a learned skill.
Mm-hmm.
And so is leadership. You can choose to be a better salesperson. You can choose to be a better leader. And if you're a bad leader today, or you're not that great at sales, i.e. you look at your performance and it's not where it needs to be or where it could be, you can take ownership on that. And that's actually the first shift to becoming better at it, right?
Yeah.
So I mean it with love and respect, but you're on the bench to play the game, get in the game and ask, and you're going to get no's. But here's the reality, Jack. To not call your dad, in my estimation, from where I sit, it's actually more unloving to leave him be, to take years of faithful donations and then just to ignore him when he stops.
Yeah.
That's communicating to me like, oh, we've moved on to someone else because you no longer have value to us. You're not giving, no value. Call you, check on you, find out what needs to be true, ask these questions, have a curious tone, seek to understand and improve, get advice. That communicates that he's actually important to me because he's an individual who has at one point been aligned with what we're doing as a mission, and I want to bring him back because I care about his legacy and I care about him as a person.
Yeah, that's perfect. That is perfect. And I'll just add to that. And, I think we're getting a time here, but, we hear from organizations that, they've all deployed automated systems and stuff to do all this. And you may feel like your organization doesn't want you to pick up the phone and call a certain segment like my dad, right? Yep. You might use Rally to text someone who's 27 years old and get $5 from them. That's fine.
That's fine.
But my dad, and like you said, he fits the years, donations and everything else, and you've lost him. Pick up the phone.
And the size of donation. So yes, and that's a good point. The size of the donation is interesting because somebody gives $25 6 times. That's not bad. That's actually pretty decent. That's $300 if they've done it all year. So you're looking at $150, right? Okay. So, but here's where that matters as a nonprofit. If our average donation is 75 and you doubled that, like you're 150, it's just 150, not just, but it's twice what our normal donor does. I, as a development person, am super curious what was true about you that had you double the average donation across the board. Mm-hmm. Most people give X, you gave Y. I'm curious, why is that? So I pick up the phone to call you, not because I'm that impressed or unimpressed. It's not about the dollar amount. I'm just curious what needs to be true about our organization, get more people like you. And how do I know unless I have a conversation? Now, it turns out, okay, you have a niece that works here. That's unique. I can't really reproduce that unless I hire everybody's nieces, right? But most of the time I learn something like, oh, wow, check this out. The way I communicated, the way I met this person, that particular ad, that particular outreach, that particular whatever resonated. Well, how can I get 10 more people like that? Because if I get 10 more people to double the average donation, I've just made a significant impact on my donor base, and I now have a path to improving my top line revenue, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not rocket science. It's just being human.
It isn't. Yeah.
Anyway,
and
I could tell.
So I hope y'all, there's our hints, tips, and tricks, and how we do what we do, translated, cranked over 180 degrees for fundraisers and people in this business of nonprofits and fundraising. And I'll encourage
our audience to do this. There's a lot of books on fundraising. I've got a few of them stacked up behind me. So there's some great resources out there, great blogs you can follow, but also can just consider picking up a sales book. There's some great sales books out there that talk about human-centered sales, person-to-person sales, building relationships and rapport, right? How to pitch anything is a great book. So the key is to learn and master. But if you read 3 to 5 books on a topic, Jack, do you realize you're like in the top few percent of people that know that topic? So somebody told me one time, like, just read everything you can about this topic and you will be in the top percentage of people about that topic.
Yes.
And all I'm doing is synthesizing somebody else's journey and experience. I'm taking a sales guy who has 20 years of experience, who wrote a book, and I'm reading and I'm accelerating my career by 20 years by just assuming he knows what he's talking about. Right?
Yeah.
And then I go apply it. So the art and science of sales can be mastered. You can grow in it. And I would encourage our nonprofits to just carry into their next conversation the mindset that they're not separating me from my money. They're giving me an opportunity and a path to be human and participate in something that otherwise I'd not be able to.
Yes.
That's philanthropy.
Well said.
And that's the bottom line, right?
Yes.
Now, I'll leave you with, and we are going to close with this. You can tell my dad was a preacher, so I've got like 3 closes, right? Not in my final close, right? So this is the key. As you do these things, it's the tactics and all these things that we're talking about. Consider the technology that amplifies this effect, right? One of my favorite things about texting, Jack, is it's one click to a call. So an email is like, I got to go find your number and now I got to get you on the phone and convince you who I am. But if I'm texting you from a phone number that has my brand and caller ID on it, and you know it's me, and then you and I have a healthy, good conversation or quick back and forth over text, and then I can say, hey, do you mind if I call you real quick? And then or I just click the number and call or drop a voicemail. Now we're in conversation. So the fastest path to an actual conversation is actually SMS.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Any other method, email, social, direct mail, there's a hop to a convo that I have to make. I have to move channels to talk. SMS, one click call. I'm there. Right. So if you're in the business of building relationships that involve conversations and simple asks, then you can do that at scale with text messaging, which is why we do mobile.
Yeah. And one-to-one text messaging, personalized, empathetic messaging. Yeah.
Personalized, human-centered, permission-based, one-to-one texting. And I guarantee you this, or I'll cover months of your subscription fees at Rally. Tell them James told you so. You will raise more money one-to-one with a smaller list, thinking about how to be human-centered, than you will do massive emails across the board. I'll take 10,000 emails, or I'll take 1,000 cell phones, of which only 100 people have to engage, and you're way better off.
Yes.
The numbers don't lie. That's why I can go on.
Exactly. The numbers show themselves.
Yeah. It's not a bet that I have to ever cash in on. All right, guys. Thanks again. James at rallycorp.com is my email. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. You can also text coach to 24365. Stop by rallycorp.com. Mash that button. Our heart here is to help you sell more? No, develop more.
Yes,
create more opportunities for philanthropy.
Just make you better. Make you better at what you do.
To make you better at what you do so you can make the world better.
That's
All right, everybody. Thank you.